Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan. Welcome to another session on Riyaad Saaliheen. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma astakhlisna wastaqdimna wasta'amilna fi dinika ya arhamar rahimin. Allahumma la mani'a lima a'tayta wa la mu'ti lima mana'ta wa la yanfa'u dhal jaddi minkal jadd. Allahumma anfa'na bima 'allamtana وعلمنا بما ينفعنا وزدنا علما رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم عن أبي موسى الأشعري رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إذا مات ولد عبدي قال الله تعالى لملائكته قبضتم ولد عبدي فيقولون نعم فيقول قبضتم ثمرة فؤادي فيقولون نعم فيقول ماذا قال عبدي فيقولون حمدك واسترجع فيقول الله تعالى ابنوا لعبدي بيتا في الجنة وسموه بيت الحمد رواه الترمذي وقال هذا حديث حسن. So Abu Musa al-Ash'ari radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he says that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he says, whenever a child of my servant, meaning a child of the servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whenever a child of the servant of Allah, he passes away, mata, he dies. قال الله تعالى لملائكته, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says to his angels, قَبَضْتُمْ وَلَدَ عَبْدِي, Allah ta'ala, he asks his angels, you took the child of my servant, you took the child of my slave. فَيَقُولُونَ نَعَمْ, the angels, they reply, نَعَمْ, yes, we did. فَيَقُول, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مَاذَا قَالَ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, قَبَضْتُمْ ثَمَرَةَ فُؤَادِهِ, you have taken away the fruit of his heart, meaning his most so loved little child. You have taken away the fruit of his heart. The angels, they say yes. فَيَقُولُونَ نَعَمْ فَيَقُول, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he then asks, مَاذَا قَالَ عَبْدِي, what did my servant said? What did my servant said? فَيَقُولُونَ, the angels, they say, حَمَدَكَ وَاسْتَرْجَعَ, your servant, he praised you and he returned back to you. Meaning he sought that part in returning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. My servant praised you and he accepted from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever decision of Allah, he has accepted it and he returned back to Allah. He turned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَيَقُولُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, he says, ابْنُوا لِعَبْدِي بَيْتًا فِي الْجَنَّةِ, Allah ta'ala, he commands the angel, build for him a palace or a house in Jannah. Build for him a place in Jannah. He will have a place in Jannah. وَسَمُّوهَا بَيْتَ الْحَمْدِ, and name it Bayt al-Hamd. Name it Bayt al-Hamd, meaning the house of praises, because of the servant of Allah. Alright, Rawahu Tirmidhi, this hadith, it is Hasanun Sahihun. Alright, this hadith is Hasan. So it is a hadith which is recognized by the muhaddithin. It has strength and it is a good hadith. It is not a hadith that is weak. It is a strong hadith. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he praises this servant. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he makes for his servant a baitan, a house in Jannah. He will have a house. Why? Because of his praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So the chapter we are doing in Riyaad Saaliheen, it is thanking and praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he goes through so much of hardship, he goes through so much of hardship and difficulties, yet still the servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he praises Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he seeks help in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards him even a bigger reward. bigger reward, and even what more than what he expected. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his mercy and his forgiveness is great. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his mercy and his forgiveness encompasses everything else. His forgiveness is greater than his punishment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he loves to forgive and he loves to show mercy upon us. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even mentions in Quran that he will test you. He will test you even by losing loved ones. In Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentions even you lose your loved ones. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test your iman. Allah will test our iman like this. So even, we have so much of love, that love a mother will have for her child. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the parents, of this child, so much love. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked the angels, did you take away the fruit of his heart? Meaning such love that the parents would have for their child. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, build for them a palace in Jannah. Because why? Even though, it was taken away from them, they accepted the decision of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and yet still they praised Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They still praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in our life, this hadith, it also shows kamalu fadl sabr ala faqd safi. It shows the completeness, of the virtues of sabr. It shows of how, sabr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he rewards, those who are patient. Inna Allaha ma'a sabirin. Allah is with those who have patience. No matter how hard, no matter how difficult, everything is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We always do raji'un. There's the same word that is used in the hadith. It is the word raja'a, and in the hadith it is mentioned what? Wastarja'a, meaning a person what? They return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when you do this amal is what? Seeking that pathway, which turns us to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When a servant of Allah seeks that pathway, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he gives him his attention. Allah subhanahu, you move to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala one hand span, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he moves to you an arm's length. You walk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will run towards you. So in this hadith, the condition here is the hamd, the praising of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That despite the difficulty and hardship, it is because we praise Allah, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shower that mercy upon us. But even me also, I have also lost loved ones. I have lost my mother also in year 2019. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mercy upon her, and open her grave as far as the eyes can see. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, put his nur and barakah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala open the doors of Jannah, sweet fragrance of Jannah for them in their graves. And also my brother, he has lost his son. This is the adab and the character that we have to inculcate in our lives. That the Prophet ﷺ is teaching in this hadith that what we should do at that time when we lost our loved ones, what we should do in that time, so that we can get the mercy and the fadl from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this hadith, it shows how great, we keep that patience and keep turning to Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what? Ibnu baytan fil jannah. Name this place that I am building for you. Name it Bayt al-Hamd. Name it the house of praises. Allah will make a house for you in Jannah, and He will name it house of praises for you. Greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we lose loved ones, we will always meet them back in Jannah. We will meet them in Jannah. We will meet them in the hereafter. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He accept us, to become servants, who will always praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is also mentioned in another hadith, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Mali abdul mu'mini idha qabatha safiyuhu min ad-dunya fahtasaba illa al-jannah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that there is no servant that is a mu'min, believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that when his child, is taken away, for his loved one is taken away from him, from this dunya, safiyuhu is his child, fahtasaba illa al-jannah, then his reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is only Jannah. Jannah becomes that person's abode. Right? So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept us to be of these servants, inshaAllah. عن أنس رضي الله تعالى عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن الله لا يرضى عن العبد يأكل الأكل فيحمده عليها ويشرب الشرب فيحمده عليها رواه Muslim. Anas radiallahu ta'ala an, he narrates that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam says, Inna Allah la yarda anil abd. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he becomes so pleased, Allah becomes so happy with his servant, ya'kulul akla, that he eats the food, fayahmaduhu alayha, he praises Allah because of this food. Right? He praises Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of this food that he has ate. وَيَشْرَبُ الشُّرْبَ, he drinks his drink, and he praises Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of this drink that he is drinking. He thanks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then this person, he gets what? La yarudha. He gets the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah becomes happy with him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes happy with him. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is mentioned, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept us to be servants that will always praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even when we are eating and we are drinking. In this hadith, it is the explanation of the virtue of hamd in that tu'am, of praising Allah at the time when we eat and we drink. And this also, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he honors that person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honors that person, and because of praising Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he tafaddala alayka bir rizq. Allah showers upon him rizq. He makes his rizq, he gives him more virtue and more blessing in his rizq, in his sustenance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa radiya anka bilhamd, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala become pleased with him because of praising him. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept us, to understand the ahadith, to inculcate, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept us to put it in our life. One of the ways and seeing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has accepted us and accepted our knowledge is that our knowledge becomes part of our livelihood. When our knowledge becomes part of our livelihood, this is a sign that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has accepted us in his part. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept us. Rabbana taqabbal minna, that we make dua, wa Allah taqabbal minna, accept us. Taqabbal minna innaka sami'un alim, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is all hearing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all knowing. So even if we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with our tongues, Allah will hear it. If we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our hearts or in our minds, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will also understand. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will also always hear our hamd and praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wa ma alayna illa al-balaghul mubin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.